The measurement of body size, weight, and proportions is called anthropometry. It is often used to assess the growth and development of children, but also provides an indicator of health in terms of size and can let us track progress or decline. There is a wide range of tools available to assess body composition, but there is no individual best method for everyone as each has different strengths and weaknesses. In fact, it is common for these methods to not be used as standalone measures, but rather combined. With there being quite a lot of material to cover on this topic, we will be dedicating 2 videos to it. This video will discuss weighing scales, BMI, waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, and waist to height ratio, while the other, which you can find a link to at the top right hand corner of the screen, will break down methods used to estimate body fat percentage, including skin fold calipers, bioelectrical impedance analysis, hydrostatic weighing, the bod pod, and DEXA. Now, when it comes to anthropometry, let's begin with the most common method of tracking weight loss progress, the weighing scale. But first, as always, please take note of our disclaimer. A frequently asked question, if not the most, regarding weighing yourself, is what is the best time of the day to check? To answer this, we first need to talk about the fluctuations in your weight throughout the day. It's important to understand that the weight you measure is more than just muscle, bone, and fat. It also takes into account your glycogen levels, your food intake levels, and your hydration levels. These are the variables that influence the fluctuations throughout the day with your weight. For instance, say someone weighed themselves yesterday evening and was 155 pounds, but then did again this morning and was 150 pounds. Would this person have effortlessly burnt 5 pounds overnight? Or were their glycogen, food, and hydration levels moderate yesterday evening, while this morning they're minimal? Most likely the latter. Accordingly, these fluctuation contributors are the relatively inconsistent factors in your weight, which change considerably day to day, or even hour to hour for that matter. At the same time, muscle, bone, and fat are the relatively consistent weight factors that don't change nearly as much in the same time frame. And in fact, this is the answer to our question. The best time to weigh yourself is in the morning before consuming anything when these fluctuations or the inconsistent variables are minimal. Moreover, when it comes to how often you should weigh yourself, this will depend on the person. However, we recommend once per week in the morning before any food or fluid intake to lessen fluctuations' impact on progress estimates. Although it's noteworthy that a drawback of using the weighing scale is that it cannot differentiate between how much muscle and fat was lost or gained, so it may be hard sometimes to know if you're hitting or missing your goals with its use, especially because the weight fluctuations already makes this a bit challenging. This is less of a problem, of course, if you're just looking to strictly lose body fat. But if you're looking to lose fat and build muscle simultaneously, which can be done for specific populations when starting out, as we've covered in the video in the top right hand corner of the screen, albeit rather slowly, this may even make it more challenging to work out your progress week to week. In this case, it may be better to monitor body fat percentage, which we have discussed in our other video on anthropometry. Nevertheless, weighing scales are a very convenient way to monitor weight loss and definitely have their place in weight management. If you're strictly looking to lose a few pounds, I recommend using weighing scale for the convenience. Just in certain instances, they're not optimal, particularly for people trying to lose fat and gain muscle at the same time, as suggested, or those morbidly obese as they may need specialized scales. Next, another measurement that is often used by clinicians to assess your weight status in terms of health that you may have heard of is body mass index, or BMI for short. BMI quantifies the amount of tissue mass, so muscle, fat, and bone, in an individual and then categorizes that person as underweight, normal, overweight, or obese based on that value. Put simply, it's a measure that shows whether you have an ideal weight for your height in terms of health. And these categories can be seen here. All that is needed to check your BMI is a measuring tape, a weighing scale, and this equation. So if a person's height was 1.8 meters and their weight was 70 kilograms, then the equation would be 70 divided by 1.8 squared, which would mean that the BMI is 21.6. As a result, based on the categories listed previously, this person would fall within the healthy BMI category of 18.5 to 24.9. Now that we know what BMI is and how to calculate it, let's compare the pros and cons of its use. The first pro, as mentioned previously, is that it's easy to carry out. All you need is a measuring tape, a weighing scale, and a relevant equation. This is why doctors commonly use BMI to assess your weight's health status, and also why it's often used to measure broad populations in epidemiological studies. Next, another pro is that you can check it independently compared to body fat percentage, where you may need the assistance of a healthcare professional. And finally, as noted, it gives you categories to evaluate your BMI score for health. Then, on the other hand, what are the cons of BMI? Well, like weighing scales, it doesn't distinguish muscle from fat. So if you carry too much weight for your height, the BMI calculation assumes that the excess weight is fat. This presents a difficulty for bodybuilders, for example, whose extra weight wouldn't be fat but rather muscle. Nonetheless, this is only for the vast minority that it may be inaccurate. It's usually a fairly accurate estimation. Another issue is that BMI doesn't consider where the fat mass specifically lies. From other videos we've made, you may recall that visceral fat is the more dangerous form of fat found in the midsection between the internal organs than the subcutaneous fat found more superficially in the midsection and solely in the arms and legs. This is relevant because you could seem to have a healthy BMI classification but still have a large waist, leading the outcome measure to be false. We will go more in depth about this for waist circumference next. And the final con regarding BMI is that it's not good for tracking body recomposition progress, as if you cannot differentiate between muscle and fat, how can you tell if you're mostly losing fat or muscle, or depending on your goal, if you're mostly gaining fat or muscle? On a side note, if you're interested in undertaking our evidence-based and results-backed personalized Plato weight management program, please click the link in the top right-hand corner of the video or follow the link in the description. Moving on, let's talk about waist circumference. Health professionals often use BMI and waist circumference together to assess health risks. The reason for this is that the NICE guidelines recommend using both concurrently, as carrying excess body fat around your torso is more of a health risk than if weight is on your arms and legs. As alluded to earlier, the waist circumference is a better estimate of visceral fat, the dangerous internal fat that coats the organs. Therefore, it's a more accurate predictor of cardiovascular risk, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome than BMI. So using both gives us the best overall picture of how your weight may impact your health. Other strengths of waist circumference are that it's easy to measure for most populations and is cheap. While weaknesses are that for those with a BMI of 35 or higher, it may be difficult to measure and less accurate, alongside being less precise for people with a medical condition involving an enlargement of the abdomen. Now, how do we measure waist circumference? First, place the tape measure directly on the skin or over no more than one layer of light clothing. The correct place to measure your waist is halfway between your lowest rib and the top of your hip bone. This is roughly in line with your belly button. And then breathe out normally, make sure the tape is snug without squeezing the skin and measure. Abdominal obesity is defined as waist circumference over 88 centimeters for women and above 102 centimeters for men. As noted, other anthropometric measurements besides waist circumference that give a better idea of the distribution of fat rather than the overall quantity of it are waist to hip ratio alongside waist to height ratio. Waist to hip ratio determines how much fat is stored on the glutes and hips as well as the waist. People who carry more weight around their midsection, so an apple-shaped body, are at a higher risk than those who hold more weight in their hips and thighs, or a pear-shaped body. Waist-hip ratio is calculated by first acquiring the waist circumference through the earlier protocol, and then measuring the distance between the widest part of the hips for the hip circumference. After, we can calculate the waist-to-hip ratio by dividing the waist circumference by the hip circumference. Scores above 1.0 for men and above 0.85 for women indicate abdominal obesity and a high risk for disease. Additionally, you may have heard the adage to keep your waist to less than half your height. Well, this correlates to waist to height ratio and is measured by dividing your waist circumference in centimeters by your height in centimeters. A score above 0.5 indicates a higher health risk. It is noteworthy that these measurements may also be challenging to produce an accurate measurement if you do them yourself. So we advise you to ask a health professional for assistance. Also, be aware that the accuracies of these tools declines if you are shorter than 5 feet or have a BMI of over 35. Have you tried any of the methods outlined in this video? What were your experiences? We'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Additionally, if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. So that has been our video. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.